Tonight, former special counsel Robert Hur in the hot seat on Capitol Hill, answering questions about President Biden's memory and mishandling of classified documents.
No matter the role, no matter the administration, I have applied the same standards and the same impartiality.
What lawmakers learned about his investigation. Plus,
the stakes, the stress, the level of tension, that's all going to go up.
The global war over microchips heats up. Why that's bad news for America's national security and your wallet. And the latest on ceasefire talks and the hunger crisis in Gaza. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Capitol Hill testimony calling into question President Biden's fitness for office. Thanks for joining us for Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And good evening in Washington. I'm Jenna Browder. Former special counsel Robert Hur in the hot seat today and taking heat from lawmakers on both sides of the aisle.
Hur's investigation looked into President Biden's handling of classified documents. In his Bombshell report released last month, he ultimately decided not to recommend charges. Hur describing Biden as an elderly man with a poor memory, and today explaining how that calculated into his decision. CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson has been following the hearing. Abigail, Hur spent several hours on the witness stand defending his work.
That's right, John. Today, Hur testified that his assessment of President Biden's memory was necessary, accurate, and fair. And he made the case that including his assessment in the report was crucial context for why he did not recommend charges against Biden for mishandling classified documents.
What I wrote is what I believe the evidence shows and what I expect jurors would perceive and believe. I did not sanitize my explanation, nor did I disparage the president unfairly.
During his investigation, Hur sat with Biden for 5 hours, which led him to conclude the president was an elderly man with a poor memory because he forgot key details from his life, like what year his son Beau died and when he served as vice president.
My task was to determine whether the president retained or disclosed national defense information willfully. I could not make that determination without assessing the president's state of mind. For that reason, I had to consider the president's memory and overall mental state.
House Democrats maintain the report was politically motivated and claim slip-ups have long been par for the course.
I believe, as is his habit, that President Biden probably committed a verbal slip or two during the interview. Mr. Hur completely exonerated President Biden.
Democrats also brought in Donald Trump's handling of classified documents in contrast to Biden's and played multiple montages calling into question the former president's mental fitness.
We did with Obama. We won an election that everyone said couldn't be won. I'm not cognitively. And you know what? When I am, you're going to know it. You're going to be the first people.
That is a man who is incapable of avoiding criminal liability, a man who is wholly unfit for office.
Republicans argued the report boils down to a few key facts.
Joe Biden kept classified information. Joe Biden failed to properly secure classified information. And Joe Biden shared classified information with people he wasn't supposed to.
They also questioned Hur's conclusion to not recommend criminal charges.
Joe Biden broke the law. But because he's a forgetful old man who would appear sympathetic to a jury, Mr. Hur chose not to bring charges.
And showed a video of Biden refuting the report's findings hours after its release.
I did not share classified information. I did not share it. With your ghostwriter? With my ghostwriter, I did not. Guarantee you did not.
And just before the hearing began, the full transcript of Biden's interviews with Hur were released, showing Biden did indeed have multiple memory lapses and trouble recalling key dates during his conversation with the special counsel. John, Jenna.
All right, CBN White House correspondent Abigail Robertson. Thank you so much, Abby. Well, by night's end, both Joe Biden and Donald Trump could officially clinch enough delegates to become their respective parties' nominees. Georgia, Washington State, Mississippi, and Hawaii are holding Republican nominating contests, while Democrats vote in primaries in Georgia, Washington, Mississippi, and the Northern Mariana Islands. On the campaign trail, President Biden took aim at the GOP's presumptive nominee.
You know, We've never lived up to, we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men and women are created equal, endowed with their creator, etc. We've never fully lived up to it. We've never walked away from it. This guy wants to walk away from it. Listen to what he's saying. Listen to what he wants to do.
Several 2024 general election polls put former President Trump slightly ahead of President Biden.
Nathan Gonzalez is the editor and publisher of Inside Elections and a Faith Nation contributor, and he joins us now. Nathan, welcome. So Biden and Trump both in Georgia this weekend. A new Emerson poll shows Trump up 4 points over Biden there, 52 to 48. Let's start there with your thoughts on that as we look forward to November. Still 8 months to go.
Yeah, well, it's no accident when candidates show up in any state, including Georgia. Georgia and Arizona, I would argue, are our emerging swing states. I think it's also a state that Biden won narrowly in 2020 that he might be most at risk of losing in 2024. The good news for Biden is that he doesn't have to win Georgia in order to get reelected, but it's right there in the center. And Trump is winning in the national polls, but he's also winning across multiple swing states, including Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada. You know, it's right now it's good to be Trump. The challenge for Republicans is that the election is not held today, and there's still time for this race to evolve.
Nathan, we're only a few days removed from last week's State of the Union, so it may be too early to tell whether the State of the Union did anything to boost Biden's poll numbers. But what about enthusiasm among Democrats?
I think the speech was a boost of enthusiasm that Democrats needed. I think Biden had been taking on water, just taking a lot of criticism for his age, his performance in office. And I think this showed Democrats that he can do this. I mean, that he can run this campaign. They can get behind him. He laid out a blueprint on specific issues of not necessarily that everyone had to agree, but at least how Democrats can run on specific issues. And I think it was key, the tone and the issues and how and getting Democrats to be on board and say, hey, this can be done.
Yeah. Special Counsel Robert Hur took a grilling today, Nathan, from both Democrats and Republicans. What did you take away from his testimony? And to your point about Biden's age and those concerns that Democrats had, does this give new life to the sticky age issue for the Biden campaign and Democrats?
Right. Most people have already made up their mind about whether Biden is fit for a second term. I don't think that this really changed a lot of minds. Overall, this is probably a good story politically for Republicans because it keeps the focus on age. Even though Democrats wanted to discredit her, I don't think that just the time spent on the issue really helps Biden. He wants people to think more broadly about issues and also think of this as a contrast, a comparison between two candidates rather than just a referendum on his ability.
Just a few seconds left, Nathan. We learned today that Republican Congressman Ken Buck of Colorado will resign next week. What do you make of the timing of his announcement and how it might affect the razor-thin margin of control in the House?
Well, this is going to make Speaker Johnson's life more difficult because it's going to take his already narrow majority down by one more seat after Buck resigns and before a special election is in place to replace him. So this is going to be, ultimately, Republicans will hold the seat because it's a Republican district, but it's going to make legislating on Capitol Hill more difficult.
All right, Nathan Gonzalez of Inside Elections, we always appreciate your time and insights. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks, John and Jen.
Thank you, Nathan. Well, House lawmakers are sounding the alarm on deep fakes. Those are pictures and videos that seem real but are actually generated by artificial intelligence. Deep fakes can make it look like someone is doing or saying something they haven't. A hearing on Capitol Hill today raised concerns that bad actors are using deep fakes to spread pornographic images of women and children online.
Recent technological advancements in artificial intelligence have opened the door for bad actors with very little technical knowledge to create deepfakes cheaply and easily. Deepfake perpetrators can simply download apps that undress a person or swap their face onto nude images. That's why, if we want to keep up with the rapid proliferation of deepfakes, we must support federal research and development of new tools for the detection and elimination of deepfake content.
And lawmakers are pushing for new policies to punish those who use deepfakes to hurt others.
By the end of the decade, the computer chip industry is projected to surpass $1 trillion worldwide. That's a lot of money. Surprisingly, though, the United States will contribute less than 10% of that.
Yeah, and that's causing some to warn the U.S. that it could be left behind. As CBN's Brody Carter reports, experts fear America could face risks to national security and the economy.
If the United States is going to keep its military edge against its rivals, it's got to develop the technology that makes that possible. And that might not seem like it's relevant to your bank account today or tomorrow, but the reality is our prosperity depends on our military edge.
Chris Miller, author of The Chip War, says that edge depends on semiconductor chips, specifically the smartest and fastest needed for artificial intelligence.
And chips that are produced by just a couple of companies, mostly designed in the United States, but still mostly manufactured in Taiwan. And that's why it's more important than ever that we make sure that Taiwan remains independent from China, because it's Taiwan that's producing all of the world's AI chips.
Taiwan produces more than 90% of the world's most sophisticated chips. Its top company, TSMC, had planned to build a $40 billion production facility in Arizona, but postponed the project due to a shortage of qualified workers.
So if you look, for example, at efforts to ramp up missile production, one of the challenges has been that we don't have enough supply of the components and also the skilled workers who understand how to make the electronics work.
To bolster the U.S. position, the Biden administration announced a $5 billion investment in research and development, on top of the 2022 CHIPS Act, which provided $52 billion to motivate companies to build new plants at home.
Unlike most parts of the economy where competition mostly happens between different companies, in this industry, competition is happening between companies, but it's also happening between countries.
Last year, the U.S. sanctioned China to slow its ability to get AI chips. In return, China banned the U.S. and other countries from using its rare earth extraction and separation technologies.
China has a 90 or 95% market share in their processing. It's not actually that the mining or the minerals themselves only come from China, but the processing factories are largely based in China.
The stakes, the stress, the level of tension, that's all going to go up.
The private sector is now stepping up. At the World Economic Forum, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman urged investors to support a groundbreaking $7 trillion tech initiative aimed at boosting global chip production and advancing artificial intelligence. Dr. Zachary Collier says the chip industry is grappling with how to make production more environmentally friendly.
It's a resource-intensive thing to make a chip. It takes lots of different chemicals, it takes lots of water, it takes lots of energy.
Industry data shows 50 new semiconductor plants are being built in 2024. 21 of those will be constructed here in the U.S., with Arizona and Texas being hotspots for production. Now, these will take years to complete, with end dates ranging from this year to 2042. Brody Carter, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Brody. The impact of inflation this election year. Some tips on how to avoid the pain of high prices when Faith Nation returns.
Welcome back. Inflation in America is up again for the second month in a row. According to today's Consumer Price Index data from the Labor Department, inflation rose 0.4% in February compared to a year ago. Inflation is up 3.2%. The higher than expected figure has some calling into question if and when the Federal Reserve will move to lower the interest rates.
Well, Mark Hamrick is the Washington Bureau Chief and a Senior Economic Analyst for Bankrate. Mark, welcome to you as always. So I was reading earlier today that core CPI is actually up 3.8% over last year, nearly double the Fed's 2% target. Mark, what's driving these high prices to persist?
And Jenna, and that core, which excludes food and energy, was actually down compared to the previous month. It's not looking great, but it's down from the peak in 2020 of 6.6%. The headline at its peak up 9.1%. At its core, inflation is irritating Americans and is continuing to take from their pocketbooks because they've lost 1/5 of their purchasing power going back to the time before the pandemic, where we're seeing prices still elevated. That includes shelter, that includes things like car insurance, airline fares, but we are seeing food flat in the latest showing, and we had gasoline really the only category within energy that was leading the way. So we are improving. but we aren't, as you said, quite yet where the Federal Reserve will feel comfortable in reducing interest rates.
That was my next question. You know, where it concerns monetary policy, the Fed seemingly has used nearly every tool in its toolkit, raising interest rates about a dozen times over the last 2 years. Are there any tools left, Mark?
The tools are still essentially, to mix the metaphor, applying the medicine. And so interest rates are restrictive. We're seeing the economy moderate, for example, in the job market. And we're also seeing a number of interest rate sensitive sectors of the economy slow. Manufacturing has been very slow for over a year now. That's also a function of the global economy. It's tough to sell a house right now unless you have some well-heeled buyers, perhaps those that are going to use cash, because mortgage rates are still above 7%. The Fed believes rates are restrictive and may, in fact, want to reduce rates in the second half of the year, fearing they are right now almost too restrictive, doesn't want to knock the economy over into a recession or a contraction.
Yeah, Mark, you tweeted a solution to affordable housing earlier today. What did Bankrate find some people are doing to buy a home while mortgage rates are still high?
There are a number of different things people can do, and one is to have patience and not buy right now, because we do believe that mortgage rates will be lower by the end of the year, perhaps 6% or below. The other thing is that builders are providing incentives and an actual path for prospective buyers to buy down their mortgage rate, perhaps which is at the market rate of 7% into the 5% range. So buying down that mortgage can reduce the monthly payment.
Mark, I think I saw that you also tweeted something about buyers are actually buying out of state. They're being lured into other states where the mortgage rates are maybe a little more affordable.
The home prices, John, because home prices have been a contributor to this problem with housing affordability. They have continued to rise. There are some markets previously red hot where they are cooling considerably. Think of the state of California, where taxes are high as well.
Mark Hamrick with Bankrate. We always appreciate your time. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, Qatar has emerged as a leader in Israeli ceasefire talks. But should the U.S. trust leaders of the small country? Why some say no, when Faith Nation returns.
Welcome back. In the Middle East, 200 tons of food is officially on its way to Gaza. It comes as the humanitarian crisis there worsens amid ongoing Israeli attacks. With most combat taking place in southern Gaza, the United Nations has a new warning about the northern region. Limited food supplies there are already killing kids, but without aid, full-blown famine will strike. Today's aid shipment is the first of its kind since the Israel-Hamas war began back in last October. Meanwhile, today the IDF announced the death of Itai Chen, an Israeli-American IDF soldier kidnapped on October 7th.
Well, as ceasefire and hostage release negotiations continue, the tiny Gulf nation of Qatar has taken a spotlight as the region relies on the country to help with negotiations.
But some experts are questioning if Qatar's ruling family is a reliable partner in the process. Chris Mitchell explains.
In 2022, the Biden administration designated Qatar as a major non-NATO ally. That designation carries military and economic privileges, as well as what the State Department calls a powerful symbol of the close relationship with the United States. Qatar also hosts CENTCOM, the largest U.S. base in the Middle East.
Qatar is an Islamist sponsor of terrorism.
Yigal Karman, the founder of Memory, the Middle East Media Research Institute, strongly disagrees with the U.S. views of Qatar, calling it a longtime sponsor of Hamas.
Qatar gave them billions of dollars over the years. They became a tiny empire, military empire. All the missiles to Tel Aviv, all the almost 40,000 weapon holders, killers, all the drones, all the motorcycles, all their equipment, everything.
Israeli attorney Netzana Darshan-Leitner tells CBN News the country uses its charities to funnel money to the terror group.
The Qatari Foundation, which is a huge charity in Qatar, gives hundreds of millions of dollars to the charity organizations of Hamas in Gaza. But the charity organizations of Hamas in Gaza are Hamas. They give food for the people in order to be loyal to Hamas. They share the same facilities with Hamas. They pay the salaries of the militants of Hamas.
Qatar's ruling Al Thani family also hosts the top leaders of Hamas, like Ismail Haniyeh. Karman also accuses Qatar of being a sworn enemy of regional U.S. allies like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Egypt. Lately, other voices like Rabbis United and Rabbi Penny Dunner demonstrated outside Qatar's Los Angeles consulate to publicly pressure the country's rulers.
We want that to end, and Qatar has the power to do it. They are ostensibly an ally of America. Is this the way allies behave? I don't think so. No. And if that's the case, they should change their ways and make a difference. They can do it.
Karman questions why the administration doesn't recognize the issue and force Qatar's hand. In January, the Biden administration renewed the CENTCOM military lease for another 10 years. Karman says the U.S. could have used relocating the base as leverage.
It's so easy. Just see if you can relocate. Qatar will become the best ally for America, in truth. But now it's a Trojan horse. Why should they do anything? America is happy with them anyway. Being anti-American, this is an enigma. Why embrace a power that is Islamist, that is supporter of terrorism, that belongs to the bloc of Iran, Russia, China?
While Karman and others wait for the U.S. to potentially remove Qatar from its position of influence, the country will likely straddle the geopolitical fence between being a U.S. ally and also standing with the enemies of America. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
All right, thank you, Chris. Coming up, an out-of-this-world homecoming. We explain after this.
All right, finally tonight, from the International Space Station to the sea off the coast of Florida, a successful splashdown today for 4 NASA astronauts.
That's right. The crew returned to Earth today after a 6-month mission in space. The SpaceX Dragon capsule soared through the early morning sky, returning the team back home. While in space, the crew conducted more than 200 experiments among a host of other astronaut duties, including monitoring the impact of spaceflight on immune function. I gotta tell you, every time I see any of this video, it just scares me.
Yeah.
I give them
We'll leave
props.
it to them.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good on them. Thank you so much for watching.
Have a great night.